Namaskar, everyone. My heartfelt gratitude to all of you for coming here. So, today's topic is Synthesis of Yoga book, first chapter, which is Life and Yoga. Synthesis of Yoga book written by Sri Aurobindo is one of his first writings, and on yoga, one of his first writings. Synthesis literally means a combination of components to make a interconnected whole. So there are various different parts and they are being combined together into an interconnected whole. And synthesis of yoga basically would mean along the same lines, combining different parts of yoga and creating a synthesis. So why would a synthesis be required? There have been thousands of, over thousands of years, various different yoga systems all across in our country and all over the world. Then why would another synthesis of yoga be required? That is the question Sri Aurobindo tries to answer through this chapter on life and yoga. One of the joys of reading Sri Aurobindo is that through his words he offers a very larger view and a wider perspective on everything, whether it's life and yoga. So to the same question, he offers a larger view on how different activities of human beings or various different human systems or yoga systems are organized. There is an overall pattern to it generally, and anything which has sustained over time, for years or hundreds or thousands of years, would have a certain pattern which happens to them. And that pattern is generally, they have a complex or an intricate and elaborate system which is organized and harmonized in a way. We could use the harmonized complexity as a word to explain it. And then it further specializes to a degree and eventually to return back to a larger synthesis or larger system. This can be understood simply in terms of an example of medical system. For example, medical system, if you look at allopathic system 150 years back, it started with one doctor taking care of every aspect of medicine, whether it's medicine or surgery, children, adults. Everything was being taken care by one doctor, and he had a whole system around it, which was, that in itself was elaborate. They had to study a lot. But then the world of specialization came in. So it started to divide into parts, and medicine and surgery got separated, and so on and so forth. Then surgery further got separated into further branches, whether it's orthopedics, heart, lung, stomach. Same happened with medicine also. So medicine also got separated. And eventually it's, reaching a point where, we have so many doctors for different specialities. So much so that, we wonder that soon we will have a different doctor for the right eye and a different doctor for the left eye. So basically there has been a lot of, to any system there happens a certain degree of specialization, and it divides into channels. And when it so much divides into channels, people get absorbed into that one specialty. For example, a stomach doctor would be looking at everything from a stomach perspective, whereas a brain doctor might be looking at just from the brain perspective. And for them, that becomes the priority then. And there arises a conflict that should I, they may see the person wanting to improve in that aspect only, and Some medicines which might help their brain may not help their heart. And same for something which might help their stomach, but it may not help their brain. So a sort of a conflict starts to arise when this specialization happens. And therein comes again the need for a unition. And then if we see in today's current time, there is a huge need for people looking for a holistic answer, or people looking for a general physician who would be able to address every aspect of their illness, who would be able to give them whole answers. So same thing has to a degree happened to yoga also over the years. We have various different systems of yoga. We have Raja Yoga, which specializes in the mind. We have the Hatha Yoga, which specializes in the physical body, how to bring the physical body into harmony. We have Bhakti Yoga, which specializes in how to put the emotions in order, organize them, and put them in union with the divine. We have Pranayama, Kriya Yoga, which does so with the pranic Shakti of a being. So a lot of specialization has happened around these, and with these specialization again is the conflict in the yogic systems also. If one starts to practice a lot of Raja Yoga, then one progresses there, but the body revolts, the body sort of gets left behind. If we work too much on just on the bhakti or the emotional aspect, there is the mind or the physical may get left behind. The intellect may get left behind. So there is a need for a combination of these things. And another aspect of this is that if one thinks that I would master one subject, I will master Raja Yoga and then I'll move to Pranayama or I'll move to Hatha Yoga, what happens there is that these systems are so vast that one is likely to get lost in one aspect of the system, and it may take a lifetime or many lifetimes to even master one system. So therein comes the need of combining and moderation, or creating a synthesis where all these systems can be practiced in moderation together at the same time, so that the whole being progresses together. Whether it's mind, prana, body, emotions, all of them move forward together. And therein lies the first answer in why a synthesis of yoga is the need of the current times. So herein, quoting Sri Aurobindo's words, he says, every form tends towards a harmonized complexity and totality. This is the word he uses. Any system takes a harmonized complexity and totality, which again breaks apart into various channels of special effort and tendency. This is how we describe the specialization channels of special effort and tendency, only to unite once more in a larger and more puissant synthesis. So it again unites into a larger system or a synthesis, which we are looking forward to in yoga. So moving next to what are the other needs, and he writes, secondly, development into forms is an imperative rule of effective manifestation. So he uses the word form, so structure. So giving something a structure or organizing it is so very important to manifesting anything. For example, if we set a goal for ourselves in life, we need a plan, we need to structure the plan, we need to give it a timeline. So giving it a form, a visualization, a structure is so very important in creating an effective manifestation of anything, whether it's yoga or any human activity. Yet all truth and practice, too strictly formulated, becomes old and loses much, if not all of its virtue. But if it gets too strictly formulated, then the essence of the practice may to a degree get lost. To give you an example, a very simple example is of the education system being practiced all across the world in the past 300 or 400 years. And the primary purpose of that, one of the primary purposes is to, make people more capable of leading a healthy life and being able to imbibe them skills of a healthy life, a balanced life. And for that, a certain structure has been created, an educational curriculum has been created. But when that structure for students gets too strict or rigid, we see a lot of rebellion from children who are being educated, or it becomes like a mugging up process. They are just, doing it for the sake of doing it. And then we question, is it really educating them? Is it actually serving the primary purpose of making them more capable human beings? Or is it just becoming more mechanical? So here also, what is required, as Sri Aurobindo says, is it must be constantly renovated by fresh streams of the spirit. So everything needs a constant evolution, a constant renovation. It must be perpetually reborn, is the word he uses. And that is what we are seeing in the education system nowadays as well, that it is being reborn. There is problem-based learning. The children are not being subjected to the exams the same way. They are being given more freedom, more flexibility, and concepts of free progress in education is coming forward. So same thing to a degree can be applied to yoga as well, that yogic systems, many of them were formulated thousands of years back, and having been practiced the same way over and over again, there is a certain degree of rigidity and strictness and prescriptiveness which has come into these systems over time. And that is where they lose their spirit. For example, even for that matter, caste system was started with a noble cause and was meant for evolution of the humanity, but it soon became very rigid and lost its purpose, and it became too strict and almost anti-spiritual growth. And that is the time 2500 years back Buddha was born to revive the spirit of yoga. He talked about oneness, he talked about witnessing, he talks about mindfulness, and a lot of other things which revived the spirit of yoga. So therein lies the second answer why a synthesis is required, because there have been lots of advancements in yoga, there have been lots of advancements in society, there have been lots of advancements in material science, and the systems that need to come up, a new synthesis needs to come up, which carries a certain degree of freedom and flexibility and moderation in practice, and allowing the sadhak to explore and constantly has the opportunity to revive the system. It should not be something, if it becomes 100 years old, it becomes strict. It is to be inbuilt in the system that it is perpetually reborn. And the key point is that through the whole process, that the purpose and essence of the yoga should remain the same, which hasn't changed, whether it is now or it is 5,000 years back or 10,000 years back. So that brings us to the point that what is the purpose of yoga? What is yoga? And if we reflect on the word yoga, it literally means, yog means union, and one of the very obvious meanings is union with the divine. Here again, the joy of reading Sri Aurobindo, he always gives us a more broad and all-encompassing definition to things. And a definition is important because it gives us an overview to the whole subject. So herein he writes in defining yoga that yoga is a methodized effort towards self-perfection by the expression of the secret potentialities latent in the being. When we hear the word methodized effort, it's a beautiful word wherein we can do an effort in doing something which is haphazard, or it can be organized or methodized. For example, steam, if we heat water in a pan and it produces steam, if it is not organized, then it just fizzles out into the air. But if the same steam is channelized in a proper fashion, it has the power to run a whole steam engine. So it has a certain method to it. It is a methodized effort put in by a sadhak, and which helps them in the process of self-perfection. Now, the word self-perfection can be seen differently from different viewpoints. If one sees it from an outer perfection perspective, it would mean being able to live up to match the belief systems or standards or the way one person perceives things to be, to match certain standards, or for a child to get perfect grades, or something else which is outer and appears beautiful and perfect. But herein one has to acknowledge that perfection is an illusion to a degree, outer perfection, because there will be different points of views. What is perfect for one person may not be perfect for the other person. So herein the word self-perfection means more towards an inner perfection of the being. And this inner perfection is, it is like a more complete expression of the gifts and the potential within. So we are all born with certain gifts and certain potentials, and we all house the infinite potential also within us. So it is like the inner perfection is like a flowering of the being, each petal representing certain values, certain gifts. And Mother has talked about different colors representing different powers of the being, different values of the being, whether it is simplicity, purity, perseverance, purity, courage, generosity, kindness. So it is a lot about expression or a flowering of these values, an expression of the potential, infinite potential within. And is it something we create, or is it something we reveal? So a great sculptor once who used to create wooden sculptures, he once said that I do not create these sculptures. They are already present within the wood. And my job is to reveal them. So same way, within us, the perfection already is present. It is about revealing it more and more, letting it flower more and more. And then he talks about, I'll repeat the line once again, yoga is a methodized effort towards self-perfection by the expression of secret potentialities latent in the being, and the highest condition of victory in that effort. So herein he emphasizes the point, the highest condition of victory. So the path of yoga is not about reaching a certain point. It is not about, we are seeking out enlightenment or a certain point. The progress on the yogic path can be infinite. It's an ever-evolving process. And herein we are trying to be the best what we can be in the present moment and achieve the highest victory in the effort. And thirdly, he talks about it is a union of the human individual with the universal and the transcendent existence. So now comes the aspect of union with the divine, and divine being expressed in three forms, which we will be covering in later chapters. But the three forms of the divine within the individual: a transcendent form which is beyond the universe, and a universal form. So the whole definition of yoga is that it is a methodized effort towards self-perfection, a highest condition of victory in that effort, and a union of the human individual with universal and transcendent existence. Now, this brings us to another challenge that we face on the path of yoga, that when a person gets preoccupied with the union with the divine, or with the self-perfection, there is a possibility that, as Sri Aurobindo writes it, that he tends to purchase the wealth of the spirit by an impoverishment of human activity. So one is getting closer and more connected with the spirit and is gaining a lot of bliss and the divine presence and a lot of joy and so on and so forth, but is getting more and more moving further and further away from human activity of daily life. And this brings us to, the common conflict that any sadhak goes through on the path of yoga, which is a conflict between the outer life and the inner life. And then if the person gets aware of this conflict and he tries to go back to his outer life and conquer the outer life, he is at risk of losing what he has gained in union with the divine spirit. And that also doesn't satisfy a sadhak. This conflict has become even more prominent in India, where there has been a sharp incompatibility which has been created between life in world and spiritual growth. So much so that a hermitage life where one renounces everything is not just an option, but has been seen as a glorified option in our country for spiritual growth. But here again, to break this paradigm, Sri Aurobindo writes that no synthesis of yoga can be satisfying which doesn't reunite God and nature and our inner and outer activity. So here lies the third need for a synthesis, something, a yogic system or a synthesis of yogic system which will be able to reunite and put our outer and inner life into harmony. How it is done is it's a large topic in itself, but just to quote Sri Aurobindo here from one of the other chapters in Synthesis of Yoga, he writes that work seems outward and distracting only until one has not found the oneness between will and consciousness with Supreme. So to a person self-absorbed in the divine, work seems outward and distracting only until they have not found the oneness between the will and consciousness and Supreme. So what do we mean by will and consciousness and Supreme here? So there are two aspects to divine. One is the static, and the second is the dynamic aspect to the divine. By the word static, we mean that there is an absolute divine being, which is beyond the time, which is beyond space. It's a timeless, formless, spaceless, absolute being, which is infinite. And it is immobile and it is immutable. So it is beyond the universe. And then there is a divine will, which is the executive conscious force of the divine. So an timeless, spaceless, infinite divine being, which is formless, and an executive divine consciousness force. When one gets absorbed in the timeless and the spaceless form of the divine, one moves further and further away from human activity. But when one finds the oneness of that timeless, spaceless with the divine will, one has the opportunity to be a beautiful divine instrument which is ever ready to work on the divine calling. And the key to finding that oneness, of course, is love. So to summarize the talk for today, the need for synthesis being three major needs. One is getting moderation in the specializations of yoga and bringing them together, wherein a person moves forward in every aspect of the being progresses together. Second, to add flexibility and freedom in the practice of yoga. And third, that the system should be able to harmonize the outer and inner life. And in process also we discussed regarding a wide definition to yoga. Thank you. So I would like to invite Dr. Bijlani to share his insights on the topic further.
I can really do no more than summarize what Dr. Mankul Goyal has just said. This work of Sri Aurobindo, The Synthesis of Yoga, is one of his major works, and it starts, as all his major works do, with a grand opening. And the grand opening is not just about yoga, but about every creative human endeavor. And he says that all these creative human endeavors go through a cyclic process, starting with a grand idea, which then over a period of time undergoes a specialization, and then there arises a need for a fresh synthesis. The idea to start with is grand, but why it undergoes specialization is because naturally some people selectively pay more attention to one aspect of it, one corner of it, and that leads to a great development in that particular corner of the subject. But then it is at the cost of the spirit underlying that grand idea. And that is why we need a fresh synthesis. The spirit is undermined in the process of specialization, and what takes over is the form. For example, in the field of yoga, Hatha Yoga acquired the form of some physical practices, but then it also underwent such a degree of specialization that the major concern of the practitioners of Hatha Yoga became not trying to unite with the divine through the body, through the activities of the body, because the body is also a manifestation of the divine and one can connect with the divine through these movements, but that was forgotten, and what instead became the main concern was exactly how many asanas should be done, exactly how they should be done, and that my way of doing it better than your method, and so on and so forth. So now this sort of rigidity creeps in, and that is why a fresh synthesis is required. And then Sri Aurobindo says that this fresh synthesis is a more puissant synthesis, more powerful, puissant is powerful, more powerful than what we started with, that grand idea. Why it is more powerful is because then it can make use of the advances made during the era of specialization. Because after all, specialization was not a waste of effort. Unless concentrated attention was given to one corner of the subject, that we would not have learnt that much about that particular corner of the subject. And therefore we can make use of it. Just as he was giving an example from medicine, that there is an urge for synthesis, but then the one who works on that synthesis today can make use of the specialization that has taken place in understanding the diseases of the heart or the lungs and so on. For example, Dr. Mankul Goyal himself is a skin specialist, so he understands skin the best, but the type of dermatology he practices looks at the person as a whole and doesn't look at it only from the allopathic point of view, but also from more holistic systems like Ayurveda. So he is using the what was learnt in the course of specializing in skin diseases, but at the same time working on the basis of a grand idea that medicine as a whole represents across borders and across traditions and across systems of medicine. So that is why a synthesis is necessary. So one reason why the synthesis is necessary is because there might have been a specialization in which the course of which the spirit has got undermined by the outer form or expression that it has taken. And the second important reason Sri Aurobindo gives for the synthesis is that it may be okay, people who retire and renounce the world and go to a corner and practice their yoga, that even if they practice one specialized school, they would somehow eventually connect with that grand idea sooner or later. But yoga, he predicted 100 years ago, would not remain confined to these hermitages. And this seems to be a prophetic statement because he wrote this in 1914, probably in the very first issue of the Arya, which was published in August 1914. And then, almost exactly 100 years later, in December 2014, the United Nations declared the International Yoga Day, which in a way is a concrete sort of expression of that development, which Sri Aurobindo had pointed out, that yoga will no longer remain confined to the hermitages of the those who have renounced the world. It will move into the outer world and enter the masses. It will enter the general population. The people in general will start practicing yoga. And therefore, for them, it is important that they not only practice it, but also understand the spirit underlying yoga. They don't do it in a mechanical way, just a set of asanas which have to be done in exactly a particular way and so on. So that is why it was necessary. But then what is that spirit that we have to preserve? That comes out in the definition which Sri Aurobindo has given, the spirit of yoga, that it is a methodized effort, which Mankul explained extremely well, towards self-perfection. Towards, the important word is towards, which means it is a direction-oriented effort. There's no obsession with the goal. The goal is, obsession with the goal could mean, say, in Raja Yoga, reaching Samadhi. But here the obsession is not with the goal. The concern is with moving in a certain direction, the direction of self-perfection. So, direction-oriented effort. Now, that quickly puts it within the reach of the common man. Because for him, to get obsessed with a very distant goal can be something, which can put him off that, no, I'll never be able to reach there. So, what's the point starting the journey? But if he knows that every step is important, and what are those steps which take us towards self-perfection? Each step can be considered self-improvement. And self-improvement in what respect? Not in terms of outer activity, which is visible, measurable, or objective, but in terms of expression of what is within the person. Like, he said that the sculpture is already within the wood, or the statue is already within the stone. You just have to chisel it. But then chiseling is a long process. It can take steps. Gradually, the stone moves towards the statue. And so it is already within the individual, and that is what has to be brought out in the process of self-perfection, which in a way is made up of small, small steps of self-improvement. And I'm glad that he brought out the difference between perfection from the outer angle and this inner perfection, because from the outer angle, we tend to have criteria, objective set criteria of perfection, like, say, the grades obtained in an exam. And that can lead to perfectionism. Perfectionism is different from the type of perfection we talk about in yoga. Perfectionism is an obsession, whereas a self-perfection in yoga is not an obsession, it is a passion. It is a passion for becoming better than we are in the true sense, by bringing out the best within us. So that is what it is, this passion which yoga is about, not the obsession to fulfill some criteria which somebody else has defined as the criteria of perfection. A perfect student, or a perfect craftsman, or a perfect artist. Those are not the criteria that we are trying to fulfill. And of course, it is a long journey, but then ultimately there has to be a goal. And what is the goal? The goal is union with the divine. And what is this union with the divine? I think one of the best ways it has been expressed, very simple to understand, is in the Gita by Sri Krishna, when he tells Arjuna, man mana bhava, be my-minded, which means your mind should become like my mind. Because basically a human being is a mind, is a mental creature. So if the mind becomes like that of the divine, then he has achieved union with the divine, which means that all our thoughts and feelings should be such as would be those of the divine. And not some divine outside, it is within us, our own soul, or our own psychic being, the dynamic aspect of the soul. So if our thoughts and feelings coincide with what that divine within us would want us to, then they coincide so completely that we are constantly in that awareness of that divine within us and can organize our life around it, then that would be the union. So that is one simple way to understand what this union is. But then that is a long journey. But every step that we take in that direction not only is important from the larger point of view that it fulfills the purpose of life, but it's also something which gives us immediately, every step gives us immediately something which we are all looking for, that is joy, lasting mental peace, and a sense of fulfillment. That is something which we are all looking for. Every step gives us more and more of these things which we are looking for, and as modern medicine has shown, once we have that, then we also tend to be more healthy, because there's a very intimate and profound mind-body relationship. Then, Sri Aurobindo talks about how this synthesis should be worked out. And first, he says what a synthesis is not. A synthesis is not placing different components that you want to synthesize being practiced in succession. As you know, Dr. Mankul Goyal said that it's not that you practice Hatha Yoga for 5 years and Raja Yoga for 5 years and then Yoga of the Gita for another 5 years. So that would not be a synthesis. It is also not placing these different components side by side. It means that you can't say that, well, I meditate for half an hour every day, so I have practiced Raja Yoga. I do asanas for 1 hour every day, so I have done Hatha Yoga. And then I also read a book on spirituality, so I have done Jnana Yoga. And then I also go and do some social work which involves activity, so I am doing Karma Yoga. And then I also listen to bhajans for half an hour, so I have done Bhakti Yoga. So this would be placing side by side. That is not what a synthesis is about. Then what is a synthesis? A synthesis takes into account the spirit underlying that totality and then weaving into it the particular aspects of different schools or different components that you are trying to synthesize to the extent that is reasonable. So the underlying spirit here is self-perfection, or rather self-improvement, moving towards self-perfection by bringing out the best within us. And best within us in what respects? Both body and mind. And therefore, we take the clue from Hatha Yoga regarding physical perfection. Yes, the body is an important instrument. Without that, we cannot do anything properly, whether we are living a yogic life or not a so yogic life. We can't practice it unless the body is in good shape. So, we take some techniques from Hatha Yoga and incorporate them in our synthesis, not forgetting that it is primarily with a larger aim. The aim is not just to do those asanas in a particular way. The aim is not just to become healthy, but the aim is to perfect the instrument so that it can fulfill the divine will, it can fulfill the true purpose for which we are here in the world, so it can function as a fit instrument. That is why we are doing these asanas. So not forgetting the spirit, we incorporate these. Now if we do that, then the rigidity about exactly how many asanas, which asanas, exactly how they have to be done, that is forgotten. Not only that, a person who is paralyzed and cannot do any asana does not get disqualified from the practice of this form of yoga, which is a synthesis, which we call integral yoga. So he does not get disqualified from it. In the same way, the mind is another important part of our instrument. So we take a clue from Raja Yoga and can work out a process of meditation without introducing into it any rigidity about exactly how to meditate, and yet we can work out this, incorporate it. But at the same time, we don't forget the yoga of the Gita, which gives a lot of flexibility to each individual. You can start with karma, bhakti or gyan, which means that there is flexibility available depending upon the inclination of the student. So we don't forget that. So we build that also into our synthesis, that there's no rigidity at all. Each person has to carve out his or her own path. So that comes from the Gita. Another thing which comes from the Gita is that it is not to be practiced only for a select few, but it can be brought into every person's life. Yogastha kuru karmani, says the Gita. That is, do all your actions from a yogic poise. So don't be, as Mangul said, that you can, if you get lost in the bliss which comes even from the initial glimpses of the divine, then you can become very passive and quietistic. You may forget activity, but then that is not to be forgotten, because that also is a part of the synthesis, and also further progress would depend upon, if one might sort of synthesize the major components of the yoga of the Gita, further progress would depend upon enlightened action which has been lubricated by bhakti. Enlightened action means action which is based on knowledge. So action, karma itself is based on gyan, but then gyan can be very, dry and insipid and not very exciting. We are creatures who are basically ruled by the passions. So that passion has to come in. That passion lubricates the action. And where that comes from? That comes from the devotion to the divine, bhakti. So action which is enlightened and further lubricated by devotion. So that type of activity should also continue. So that would be a synthesis. That does not require compartmentalization into what we will do in the morning, what we will do in the evening, and a rigid routine. People are sometimes surprised why in Sri Aurobindo Ashram there's no rigid routine about exactly what is to be done when and exactly how it is to be done. That rigidity is not in keeping with the spirit of this synthesis. The synthesis is about building in that flexibility which allows each seeker to carve out his or her own path depending upon his inclinations, temperament, and circumstances. So that is what this synthesis is about, and why Sri Aurobindo felt it necessary to work out this type of a synthesis about 100 years ago. And the main schools of yoga that he took into account while working out this synthesis were Hatha Yoga, Raja Yoga, Yoga of the Gita, and Tantra Yoga, which further emphasizes, Tantra Yoga further emphasizes not neglecting any aspect of worldly life and bringing that also into this synthesis. So these were the major schools that he took, and of course to that he added his own vision, which was extremely futuristic, and to that he also added some elements which go beyond all these traditional yogas, in the sense they added a collective element. It's not only for the individual self-perfection, but for perfection of the human race. So that is what this synthesis is about.